Welcome, everyone. We're going to give this a moment for everybody to join. Hope everybody is having a fantastic Wednesday. Give it just a few more seconds so that everybody can get in. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Trista Bishop-Watt. I'm the Director of Government Relations for Good Reason Houston, and we're very excited to have you join us and to share some updates from this legislative session. So today we're exploring From Capital to Classroom, the 89th Texas Legislature's impact on Texas schools. And we're really going to dig into what passed this session and what we can see for our schools, especially in the Houston area. At the outset, we want to make sure at Good Reason Houston that we are making Texas and especially the Houston area a national leader in education. And we believe that this is something that is possible if we all work together. Specifically, we're working to connect the dots to improve public education. And we do this by bringing together parents, lawmakers, district leaders, educators, and community partners so that we can all have a clear understanding of what our schools and our students need in order to move the needle and ensure that students have success. Ultimately, we want to make sure every child in every neighborhood has access to a high quality public school. So thank you for joining us today in order to have this important discussion about education policy and what it means for our schools. A quick overview of what we're going to touch on. So first, we're going to cover what legislation passed this session and what that means, and then really dig into some of those details about the bills and especially how it's going to impact our Texas classrooms and our Houston area. So we'll look at some specific policy areas like funding early education, effective educators, and post-secondary success, and really dive into what that looks like. Before looking ahead to the future, what this means after the legislative session and what we can expect moving forward, and then have some next steps for all of us as we work together to push for more for our students. So some 5 quick takeaways right at the outset. We want to make sure that we have a high-level overview of what happened this session. First, public education scored a large investment, $8.5 billion. Public schools in the Houston area could collectively see a $300+ million increase next school year to help them weather some of the budget constraints that we've been seeing, not just in the Houston area, but across the state since the COVID-19 pandemic. 2, this session was a win for educators with new funding for compensation and preparation pathways. And these investments together serve to strengthen recruitment and retention for experienced and effective educators and just make sure that we have a great pipeline for effective classroom instruction. 3, the legislature focused on building strong foundations in early education through high quality progress monitoring and supportive interventions, which will ensure students are on track for success early on. This is critical because our youngest learners are the ones that need the most support to make sure that they are prepared and on grade level before we start to see achievement gaps set in. 4, investments in career and technical education, or CTE, you may have heard it referred to as CTE, include expansion of free dual credit opportunities and alignment with post-secondary outcomes. All of these things will help ensure students are prepared for success after graduation. And finally, 5, education savings accounts will be implemented in 2 school years, and we could see over time a reshaping of the composition of school systems between public and private institutions. So, what passed and why it matters? Let's dig into some of the bills that were successful this session and what that really means. So, some key legislation here. This is the bill that has been making headlines towards the end of session, and that you're certainly hearing about because this is a large bill that includes strong investments for our public schools and covers a lot of ground. We're going to get into a lot of the details a little bit later with the impact analysis, so you can see how some of these pieces fit in with what's going on in our classrooms and what you can expect from this. But at a very high level, House Bill 2 is an $8.5 billion school finance package, and this has already been signed into law by the governor. So with school systems across the state facing budget deficits, the legislature delivered a robust school finance package to help ease the strain. HB2 directs funding towards high impact areas like early education and staff compensation. And we'll touch a lot on the teacher side of things, but I do want to mention at the outset that this does also include a dedicated allotment to support raises for non-teaching staff. This is something that was responsive to the asks and requests of school districts throughout the session. So wanted to flag, because we won't be able to get into that a little bit later, that this is something that was included in the final package. In addition to a $55 per student increase in basic funding, the bill includes targeted investments to help cover the rising costs of things like school safety, special education, and essential expenses like insurance. And by covering these critical areas that school districts already have to pay for, the new funding allows districts greater flexibility to stabilize their budgets and invest in other strategies that directly support student success. Basically, by covering a lot of these necessities, the legislature has ensured that school districts have the flexibility to move dollars towards the classroom and to support our students where they need to be. Some other key legislation that passed this session, and this is by no means all of the bills that touch on public education. We'll cover a few other notable pieces of legislation in just a moment, but did want to flag these for folks. SB 1786 actually builds on the framework that was done last session in House Bill 8. So House Bill 8 was the community college finance bill that restructured the way that those community colleges work and focus more on outcomes for students, specifically pathways that are going to lead to more success. So this framework allowed the legislature this session to expand access to free dual credit courses for more students, increase data quality and agency coordination, and refine the definition of what a credential of value is to focus on accessing a self-sufficient wage. At Good Reason Houston, this is something that we hold near and dear. We are committed to ensuring that the number of students that are able to graduate and access a self-sufficient wage is doubled over the next several years. HB 117 establishes the governor's task force on the governance of early childhood education and care to tackle structural and operational challenges in Texas's early childhood education system. Again, it cannot be overemphasized how critical early education is to ensure students have a strong foundation. So this task force could really shape and ensure that the different agencies that coordinate around early education are able to be on the same page and coordinate data systems. Similarly, HB 3963 creates a cohesive and streamlined data system for early childhood education, ensuring coordination of the state agencies that cover early childhood and allowing better visibility into program outcomes. So together, these bills could do a lot to shape our early education system structure. I will name that while SB 1786 has already been signed into law, HB 117 and HB 3963 are still awaiting the governor's attention. The governor has until June 22nd to veto any bills. So while these are not fully across the finish line yet, they have passed the legislature and are just awaiting the governor's attention. SB 991 defines chronic absenteeism as an at-risk category for dropping out of school and increases data reporting to support chronically absent students. When you look at different data points for student outcomes, chronically absent students face significant hurdles compared to their peers. So by defining chronic absenteeism and including it as an at-risk category, this allows school districts better visibility and also resources to be able to support those students. This bill also has not yet been signed. SB 2185 increases data reporting for approved alternative language programs and provides funding under the bilingual education allotment for them. So here are some other noteworthy bills that you may have heard about in the media or through conversations with other folks, and we wanted to make sure that we highlighted where these landed. So SB 2 is one that gained a lot of attention throughout the legislative session. This is the Education Savings Account bill. So while this is not directly tied to public education because they have a separate funding structures, SB 2 does introduce a universal education savings account program. So education savings accounts are state-funded accounts that can help pay for specific approved education expenses outside of public schools. So the bill allocates state funds to applicants for non-public education expenses like private school tuition, instructional materials, tutoring, and certain homeschooling costs. This program will be available to all Texas school-age children, although there is a priority structure in place to ensure that students with disabilities and low-income families receive priority for approval. It allocates about more than, but about $10,000 per year for students at accredited privates to attend accredited private schools, up to $30,000 a year for students with disabilities at accredited private schools, and up to $2,000 a year for homeschool students. Students may not access funds and remain enrolled full-time in public schools. So this is important to note that although they can cover things like tutoring costs, if a student is being counted towards a school district's full-time attendance such that they receive money for that student, they are not eligible to receive funds. As the program is implemented, the state could see shifts in public and private school enrollment. And this is important for folks to note because the way that our public school finance system works is that the money follows the student. So if a student is enrolled and attending a public school, then the public school receives money for that student in attendance. If students were to shift to a homeschooling or to a private school environment, that does mean that the district loses that enrollment. Other noteworthy bills that you may have heard about, HB 1481 prohibits cell phone and other electronic device usage during instructional time. HB 2 makes changes to student discipline, and this is a pretty long bill that includes a number of different moving parts, but it includes extending time for in-school suspensions. It removes mandatory DAEP for vaping offenses, and it establishes a virtual expulsion program. HB 824 requires integration of civics instruction in the social studies Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. For those who are not familiar, the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills are the standards that we have as a state for each subject and what the student needs to be able to know and do on grade level. And finally, HB 27 adds a half credit in financial literacy as a graduation requirement, in addition to a credit in either economics, world history, or world geography. That one does affect graduation requirements, so I just wanted to make sure that I highlighted it. Again, by all means, these are not all of the bills that touched on public education. You may have heard many others, but these are some of the ones that are more noteworthy from the session. I did see a question from somebody before we move on about SB 1786. This is the post-secondary bill and how a self-sufficient wage is defined. So I can say that statutorily, this focuses on a self-sufficient wage based on, you know, the wage metrics that we use as a state to determine what a living wage is. And that the goal of the bill is to ensure that those pathways lead to not only a return on investment for the amount that was spent on attaining the credential, but also a self-sufficient wage on top of that return on investment over time afterwards. Diving in to an impact analysis. So a lot of this is going to be things that focus on Texas classrooms in general, but also making sure to hone in on what this means for the Houston area and for our students here. When I talk about the Houston area, I want to be clear about what this geography looks like. So this covers about 11 different independent school districts that are in the Houston urban core. So every time that I mention Houston, this is what I'm talking about, unless I give a caveat for a different geographic area. So for the most part, it's going to be these 11 different school districts. After last session, Houston school districts face significant budget deficits. If y'all were reading the news over the last couple of years during the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond, you would see a number of different challenges by our school districts. We've had districts that have had to cut different programming, that have had to cut staff, and even school districts that have had to consider closing campuses. This session, HB2 delivered, as I mentioned before, an $8.5 billion school finance package. And this is a look at what is included in this package. And again, we'll cover some additional details. This is a very lengthy bill with many different components, but at a very high level, these are the different pieces of funding. And these are projected estimates, so the actual numbers could differ a little bit. But what we're looking at here is an increase to the basic allotment. This is the per student amount that school districts get at a base level in order to educate students. Teacher compensation, support staff compensation, teacher preparation, a lot of money that is going to support staff at school districts. A dedicated funding for special education, early learning, career and technical education, and also some additional funding for things like those necessities I mentioned, school safety, fixed costs. So we're going to dive in a little bit more here, but this is an overview of what that looks like for our school districts by the numbers. Looking at the Houston impact for our school districts, and again, many of these things apply to Texas classrooms in general. But in addition to that $55 per student increase in the basic allotment, the legislature really focused on targeting funds in high need areas and high impact areas. This is important because high need areas are ones that our school districts need funds in order to support their costs that they have to cover. And then high impact areas are areas in education that have the greatest return on investment. And when we talk about return on investment in education, that means the greatest impact for our students and for student learning. So those are critical areas to fund. For our Houston school districts, many of these areas of high cost encumber otherwise flexible funds. So school districts have struggled across the state, but especially in the Houston region, to meet the mandates in HB3 from last session. So last session, House Bill 3 required officers at every campus to support school safety. And because that requires officers, Houston in particular has a shortage of officers, and it has made it very difficult for school districts to be able to meet this requirement. By doubling the school safety allotment, districts will have to divert fewer funds to meet state safety requirements, and instead can use those funds to support our classrooms. Similarly, rising costs for contract services to support students with disabilities have impacted school budgets. Ahead of session, when we talked to our superintendents in the Houston area, they said that contract services in particular for students with disabilities had experienced a lot of inflation over time. And because those are needs that have to be met and the school district has to provide for, that has been impacting school budgets significantly. The additional funding and transition to an intensity of service model for special education helps mitigate a lot of these inflated expenses. So an intensity of service model focuses not just on providing funding per student in special education, but focuses on the types of services and the intensity of need in those services to make sure that they're fully funding the types of support that the student needs. Finally, inflation has caused an increase in many fixed costs for districts. So this includes transportation, insurance, especially in the Houston area because we are prone to natural disasters and flooding. The cost of property insurance has gone up significantly, which impacts homeowners, but it also impacts our schools. So the new allotment for basic costs, or the ABC allotment, was created in response to district feedback to address those needs. So the combination of all of these areas of investment mean that school districts have dedicated funds to meet some of those basic things that they have to spend money on so that they can then transition a lot of their other funds that have been focused on that on our classrooms, which is really critical. Looking just at the dollars here overall for the Houston area, this is about $307 million for fiscal year 26. And that equates to, on average, $552 per student. You can look at a breakdown of the different districts in the Houston area here and see. So for example, Houston ISD is looking at a revenue increase of about $96 million or $624 per student. Aldine ISD is looking at $26 million here. So this is a significant investment for our region and for our students. So looking at early education and where we were really heading into session, Houston students have been falling behind grade level, and that starts as early as third grade. So looking at STAR and how our students are performing, we're seeing less than half of our students meeting grade level standards across all grade levels in both reading and math. And this is certainly a concern for all of us in the education space because we want our students to succeed, and it starts very early. So 37% of students were meeting grade level by last year in third grade math, and 42% were meeting grade level in reading by third grade. I will name that these stats were from last year, and we're actually in the process of receiving additional information from TEA. So end of course exams results have been released this week. And for folks that are interested in insights and what we saw from those end of course exams, you can go to goodreasonhouston.org/news to see our analysis of those scores. But our 3 through 8 results are still not released. So keep an eye out for additional updates from us at Good Reason Houston because these numbers could have changed. But moving into session, this is where our students were and what the legislature was grappling with in order to support our students. Looking again at HB2 and what this means for early education, ultimately this is progress monitoring, it's targeted student support, and it's teacher training. The state will adopt a list of approved reading and math screeners in grades K through 3, allowing educators, parents, and school boards to closely monitor student progress. For folks that aren't familiar with what a screener is, this is a very short interaction between a teacher and a student so the teacher can assess if the student has learned the skills that they need in early reading. So this might look like being able to put sounds together and sound out a word, or try and figure out what word might be missing from a sentence. So those are our small 5 to 10 minute screeners that are done one-on-one between a teacher and a student to be able to assess progress. And for students that are falling behind based on those screening instruments, districts must provide evidence-based literacy interventions for those at risk. So this is dedicated funding to support targeted interventions for students. And we've seen a lot of success in our later grades with these high quality tutoring components. So being able to ensure that our students in K through 3 are receiving the support before they get to third grade and we realize they're falling behind is really critical. The bill also strengthens teacher, principal, and interventionist development by requiring math achievement academies, complementing existing reading academies, and equipping educators with the skills they need to foster strong early learning and help more students succeed. I'm going to flip back just a moment to look at the difference between reading and math here, because what we're seeing across the state, but also in the Houston area, is that math progress has been lagging the growth that we've seen in reading. So this dedicated support for teachers in math ensures that the quality of math instruction is where it needs to be to support our students and to accelerate that growth. Districts will receive an additional weight to the early education allotment for all students in K through 3 to support stipends for these academies, to make sure that our teachers receive stipends for the training that they have to accomplish. And although pre-K students don't generate weighted funding under the allotment, the funds for the early education, the existing early education allotment, are redistributed to prioritize the remaining half-day funding for pre-K. There are several other early education components that are included in House Bill 2, but these are some of the ones that we believe are really going to move the needle for our students. There are some other components in there that we think might have some unintended consequences, like prohibiting districts from charging tuition for students who are ineligible for pre-K, that might reduce the number of affordable options for folks in our area, but those are pieces that don't go into effect for a couple of years. So there are still opportunities through rulemaking or for our legislators to revisit those components. But the progress monitoring, the targeted student support, and the teacher training are really critical opportunities for our districts to be able to support our youngest learners and ensure that they are on grade level before 3rd grade. Looking at the Houston impact, as I mentioned, students have remained behind pre-pandemic levels in math, although I will flag for folks that based on our end of course results that we just got from TEA, the Houston region has seen significant progress in Algebra 1, which is certainly a positive, some positive momentum towards math. But the dedicated focus in these early grades on improving progress monitoring and staff development offers a pathway to greater student growth. Parents, school boards, and communities will have increased visibility into early academic development and both literacy and numeracy thanks to the new progress monitoring screeners. And this is really critical because the bill does require that these results are shared with parents so that parents know how their students are doing in those early grades to be able to support as well. Additional funding for proven strategies leveraged by Houston school districts will directly benefit our highest needs students. So districts like Houston and Aldine ISD have implemented research-based turnaround models like Accelerated Campus Excellence, or ACE, if you have heard of ACE. In Aldine ISD, this has led to growth that has exceeded similarly situated school districts by 16 percentage points. So those campuses that are ACE campuses in Aldine have seen a lot of progress over time, and compared to other campuses that have the same basic makeup of students, they have seen significant progress. Districts like Aldine ISD have also implemented the additional day school year program. This is an opportunity to provide more instructional time for students throughout the school year. And by maximizing those instructional minutes, that helps drive student learning. We hear a lot about things like summer slide, which is where over the summer students lose some of the progress that they've seen throughout the school year. And programs like ADSE, the Additional Day School Year program, are opportunities for districts to combat some of that progress decline and also to maximize the number of instructional minutes. I did get a question before we move on from early education. Were there any bills for funding for high quality full day pre-K? Will there be anything in the future? So I'm going to flip back just a moment. You may have heard a lot about the legislature funding full day pre-K with House Bill 2. There's a complicated mechanism for how they made that happen. So at a very, very high level, we have an early education allotment, and students in K through 3 generate funding under that early education allotment to support early programs, including pre-K. So what the legislature did this session to prioritize pre-K is to take the funding from the early education allotment and ensure that it goes to districts first to fully fund the remaining half day of pre-K before then being distributed to school districts based on the usual formula in the early education allotment, which focuses on emergent, bilingual, and educationally disadvantaged students. So while at the end of the day, it is not new state money for early education, it is a redistribution of the money that is there. But there is an additional weight that was added to support the stipends for reading and math academies, and that is for all students in K through 3. So those funds under the early education allotment can be used for those stipends. It can be used to support pre-K, and it can be used to support reading and math strategies in K through 3. So each of those things can, the early education allotment districts can use those funds for those purposes. Moving on to our educators. So heading into session, teacher turnover remained high. This is a look at the overall teacher turnover in the Houston area. And I will flag that this is not the same geography that I mentioned earlier. This focuses on Region 4, which is broader than just that core Houston area. It includes more of Harris County. So, but there is a nearly 20% teacher turnover rate in Houston from the 23-24 school year. And not all education pathways are created equal. So some of those certification pathways lead to greater retention, especially the higher quality preparation programs. So you can see over on the side, this is a graph from the Texas Education Agency that shows that, for example, non-certified teachers are less likely to stay in the classroom over the course of 5 years than teachers that have gone through a traditional undergraduate program. And so what this really highlights is preparation matters, and it impacts our teacher turnover rate. So HB2 includes strategies to strengthen the pipeline for experienced and effective educators. This includes a new allotment to a new allotment that creates a permanent pay increase for experienced educators at moments of high turnover in their educational careers. So we often see teachers leave the profession at around 3 years and around 5 years. So what this allotment does is provide for our urban core districts, for districts that have a lot of students, so over 5,000 students, $2,500 for teachers with 3 to 4 years of experience, and then $5,000 for teachers with 5+ years of experience. So this recognizes that we want to ensure that our teachers that are staying in the profession and staying in our classrooms are compensated based on their impact. Similarly, an expansion to the teacher incentive allotment will allow up to 50% of educators in participating districts to qualify for higher salaries. For folks that aren't familiar, the teacher incentive allotment is a funding stream through the state that recognizes teachers who, based on their district's teacher evaluation system, are considered highly effective. It provides additional compensation for those teachers in a tiered system based on how they score. So this is really critical for ensuring our teachers that have the greatest impact are also incentivized to stay in our classrooms. So up to 50% of educators in districts that participate in TIA will be able to take advantage of these funds and these higher salaries, which is critical. The bill also invests in high quality preparation pathways that provide aspiring educators with real classroom experience. These are programs like teacher residencies, where teachers are able, where prospective teachers are able to work towards their certification at the same time that they are working alongside a mentor teacher and in an actual classroom, where they can see how they should be managing a classroom and supporting instruction before they're provided a classroom of their own kiddos. The bill also supports certification fee waivers in hard to staff areas like bilingual and special education, and offers free pre-K for teachers' children. I'll also name that the bill does work to phase out the number of uncertified teachers in core subjects. So some of you may see that this is by next year. It actually allows districts to have a transition plan over time so that we're reducing uncertified educators that are in core subjects like reading and math. Looking at the Houston impact, what this means for our classrooms. So high teacher turnover has led to a reliance on underprepared and inexperienced educators. So as we've seen teacher turnover increase, we've also seen the number of first-year educators that we're relying on our classrooms increase. So with the rising costs for training and development, as we have to recruit more teachers and train them up so that they're prepared to be in a classroom, this has led to additional strain on our district budgets and also, inconsistencies over time with students and their turnover in teachers. So the strong focus this session on educators strengthens our state and our region's pipeline for recruiting and retaining effective and experienced educators. Our Houston teachers actually disproportionately benefit from the expansion of the teacher incentive allotment. 10 of our 11 school districts are participating in or are in the process for full approval for TIA. And even before the expansion, across the state, TIA has led to an average salary increase of over $11,000 for participating educators. So this is a smart mechanism for ensuring that our educators that are dedicated and highly effective have access to a six-figure salary. Bilingual education is a hard to staff area, and around 35% of Houston students are emergent bilingual, 35% of our students. So supports like the certification fee waivers that allow more educators to seek that specialized certification, along with changes that I mentioned earlier in SB 2185 to provide bilingual education allotment funds for approved alternative language programs, really supports our diverse Houston schools and our students with language acquisition. Looking at post-secondary readiness, Houston faces some strong challenges for our graduates. This is a look from our post-secondary research, and for folks that haven't checked it out, I highly encourage you to go to our website and take a look. But 88% of all of our students are actually graduating from high school, which is fantastic. But over time, what we see is that only 47% of those actually enroll in post-secondary within 2 years of graduating high school, and only 27% are completing a post-secondary credential within 6 years of graduating high school. 20% of our students, just 20%, 1 in 5 of our students are earning a living wage within 6 years of high school graduation. And at Good Reason Houston, we believe that this number is too low, and we know for the folks that are joining our webinar that you do too. So as we work to support our students and ensure that they have access to a self-sufficient wage, the policy work that is done by the legislature is critical for having the framework to be able to push for better for our students. Houston area districts still rank among the lowest of Texas urban districts for college, career, and military readiness. So if you look at, these are the Texas Urban Council districts, the TUC districts. For some of our Houston area schools, we are actually seeing fewer students that are meeting college, career, and military readiness rates, and a little bit less growth than many of the other areas across the state. So this is an area that is critical, especially in the Houston region, for us to focus on. So a couple of bills at play here, and I know that we've gotten some questions about SB 1786. But HB2 and SB 1786 ensure that there is a focus on career and technical education in alignment with post-secondary outcomes. So CTE received substantial attention this session, leading to triple the funding for pathways in technology early college high school. These are high school programs in which students can seek an associate's degree at the same time that they're completing their graduation requirements that focus on some of those career and technical education skills. more money in CTE facility funding, and additional subsidies for students taking career assessments and teachers seeking CTE certification, again, focusing on that certification pathway. Changes in eligibility to the financial aid and SWIFT transfer program, the FAST program. This is the free dual credit program for educationally disadvantaged students. Will allow more of those students and P-TECH students to take advantage of those free dual credit opportunities. Refinement of the outcomes-focused community college finance system that I mentioned before, emphasize credentials of value that lead to a return on investment for that credential and to a self-sufficient wage. And finally, enhance data collection and coordination between the state agencies, offer better market forecasting. So what jobs are going to lead to better opportunities for students, and transparency to drive post-secondary success. At the end of the day, we want to ensure that our entire school system at the state level and the local level has a clear idea of the different pathways that are going to set students up for success. And this is the way to do it, to ensure that data coordination, to ensure that there are clear pathways for students into those industries, into those jobs, and into those skills that they need to be successful after graduation so that they can earn that self-sufficient wage. Looking at the Houston impact, Houston has great potential for post-secondary opportunity, and we're well situated as a city to be able to provide this for our students. We have thriving industries and strong university and community college partners here. Our school districts already take advantage of many of the CTE options that lawmakers have expanded and funded this session. So the investment in these programs mean that our Houston area school districts benefit and our students benefit. Many districts have implemented P-TECH programs and partnerships with community colleges for dual credit courses. So these policy changes will directly benefit those career-focused programs. Local districts have pursued innovative partnerships for CTE programs. For example, Aldine ISD's Health, Education, and Learning, or HEAL partnership with Memorial Hermann provides CTE education tied to in-demand health careers. The facilities that are needed to support these types of learning opportunities are expensive. So making additional CTE funding critical to building these pathways. The inclusion of those additional funds for those facilities offer more opportunities for students to get the hands-on learning that they need. Going to take just a moment before we look ahead to see what other questions we might have here. So there are some questions here, and I'll have to check back. But if the new half-day funding for pre-K applied to full-day programs for 3-year-olds, if the district does choose to offer those programs, this is based on the average daily attendance calculation for school districts. So it's for pre-K students that are in daily attendance with the school district. They receive half-day funding through the normal calculation, and then through the new changes to the early education allotment, they will be prioritized for that early education allotment funding for the remaining half day. All right, so diving in a little bit to some of the topics that are going to be future focused. This legislative session did cover a lot of ground and a lot of bills passed. However, there were still some things left on the table, and one in particular that we want to highlight because it's something that was covered pretty extensively in the news, and we know that this was a topic of conversation throughout the Houston area. So an outstanding policy topic from this legislative session remains assessment and accountability. The legislature failed to reach consensus on SB 1962 and HB 4, which has left assessment and accountability unresolved. For folks that were following the session, you may have seen a lot of conversation about bills that would replace the STAR. So that's both of these bills, both the Senate and the House proposal, would have replaced our current assessment system, the STAR, with a new assessment system. So the Senate here offered a very forward-looking proposal that would have replaced STAR with a through-year criterion referenced assessment aligned to grade level standards, which would provide timely, actionable data for educators and families. And I know that this is a little bit jargony, so I'll explain. A through-year assessment model, rather than having just one summative test at the end of a school year, would offer tests at the beginning, middle, and end of the year to be able to see growth and progress and provide teachers and parents with actionable data throughout the school year to ensure that students are receiving the instruction that they need before that summative assessment at the end of the year. Many of our school districts already use interim assessments, but this would be a statewide through-year assessment that was proposed. Criterion referenced means that the way that the assessment is graded is by seeing if students are actually meeting grade level standards, if they have mastered the knowledge and skills that they need to be considered on grade level based on our Texas essential knowledge and skills. So this would have provided, again, timely and actionable data for educators and families. The Senate's proposal also included enhanced A-through accountability indicators to better reflect college, career, and military readiness. Again, trying to make sure that we're aligning those indicators to actual post-secondary outcomes to support the programs that are going to better lead to a self-sufficient wage and success after graduation. It also would have maintained consistent annual ratings to ensure transparency for families and communities. If y'all have tuned in, you might have noticed that we haven't had accountability ratings for the last couple of years, and we did get the 2023 ratings released, but our ratings have been wrapped up in litigation between school districts and the Texas Education Agency. So the Senate proposal would have clarified our statutory provisions to ensure that those ratings were released to families on a regular basis, so that we know how our students and how our schools are doing. Conversely, the House's counter proposal would have risked some fairness and transparency in the system. It would have transitioned the state to a nationally norm referenced assessment, and that type of assessment, rather than grading against grade level, would grade students on a curve, grade students against each other. And the concern there from a fairness perspective is that means that regardless of how students are doing and how well they're mastering content, there would always be students that were above the curve and always students below the curve because it's a forced distribution. It would have added non-academic indicators like extracurricular participation to the A-through accountability system, which makes it hard to see how our students are progressing towards those critical academic benchmarks. And finally, it would have reduced the closing the gaps domain. This is the score that we have in our A-through accountability system to support our highest needs students that need the most support in order to meet grade level, to just 5% from 30%. So it would have reduced that focus in the A-through accountability system, which would have undercut support for our highest needs students. So while both the House and the Senate did put forward proposals that would have eliminated the STAR, the difference in those bills is really critical. And we know that this is a conversation that, although they couldn't reach consensus this legislative session, the conversation will continue throughout the interim. And we anticipate into next legislative session. So this is one that everybody should keep an eye on moving forward, especially as the momentum builds for reform and assessment and accountability. The legislative interim. So the legislative session ended on June 2nd. Bills are going to be signed into law or vetoed by June 22nd, but the work does not end there. Although the Texas Legislature doesn't meet again until 2027, they will be hard at work over the interim. Agencies will be crafting rules to implement legislative changes. So all of this legislation that was passed this session and has been put into place is going to go to the rulemaking side of things, and all of the agencies that have been tasked with implementing these bills will be implementing rules and seeking public comments on that rulemaking. The legislature will set interim charges in preparation for the next legislative session. So these are specific topics that each chamber of the legislature plans to really dig into throughout the legislative session to prepare for the next session. Committees will meet to seek feedback on those charges and prepare recommendations for their colleagues. So we always keep an eye out for the charges that are being given to both the education focused committees in the House and the Senate. And these are really opportunities throughout the legislative interim to help guide implementation on the rulemaking side of things and shape future policy with these interim charges in advance of the 90th legislative session. So as the rulemaking develops, as these bills are getting implemented, and as the legislature, after they take some time off this summer, comes back with their interim charges, stay tuned with Good Reason Houston. Be sure that you're following us in our newsletters so that we can share with you opportunities to be able to weigh in and make an impact for our students moving forward. We're grateful for the work this session that the legislature has done, but we're always looking ahead and making sure that we are on top of the policy changes that might come in the future. So looking at some next steps. If you want to stay engaged, if this is information that resonates with you and you want to make sure that as we're moving throughout that interim that I mentioned and moving into rule making authority, or even to hear what we have going on locally, here are ways that you can be engaged in public education and ensuring that we're connecting all of those dots to support our students. So first, sign up for Good Reason Houston's newsletters to receive timely updates on public education, highlights for key data trends, and insights into how local and state decisions are shaping the future of Houston schools. As I mentioned earlier, our STAR results are coming out. We already have those end of course results that you can check out on our website, but the results for 3 through 8 and our analysis will be coming out afterwards. So make sure that you're signed up to receive those alerts from Good Reason Houston. For others in your network who weren't able to tune in today, this webinar will be available online for streaming in the next couple of days, and we'll be sure to share that on our website and send that out through our newsletters. We'll also be sharing a one-page resource along with this to summarize some key legislative changes, mostly House Bill 2, this session, so that you can have a handy guide at your fingertips. And finally, keep an eye out for future webinars and events at goodreasonhouston.org/events. We pretty regularly have webinars that dive into particular topics and data trends that we're seeing in our public schools. So it's always an opportunity to have greater visibility into what our Houston students need and how you can support. Thank you to everyone that was able to tune in today. I'm sure that I missed some questions here, and we'll see if we can get back to some of you as we send out the follow-up email to everybody that attended. But we really appreciate you taking the time to join us and hear about policy changes and how they're going to impact our schools. And we certainly appreciate folks that supported during the legislative session, kept up to date with what was happening, or even tuned in now for opportunities to support our students and move forward. For those that are interested in signing up for our newsletter and want to stay connected for future opportunities, you can scan this QR code to make sure that every child in every neighborhood has access to a high quality public school. I'll leave this up for a moment so that folks are able to grab it. But like I said, we really appreciate you joining us. We really appreciate you staying engaged, and we appreciate your commitment and support to public education in Houston. Thank you all.